Now we come to chapter 3. Now, this is Nebuchadnezzar educated all of the people that he invaded. He would take their royalty and educate them and compromise them religiously so that they would work for him. Well, in this situation, what's coming up here is the loyalty test. He calls all of the people that he's trained from all of the nations, so basically his entire empire, and they come to the plain of Dura where he sets up the statue. Obviously, he's thinking about the statue that he made. So in this case, they all have to bow down. Now, one of the things is that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego probably saw this coming in advance. If they had to arrange for hotels and all the things to bring thousands of these people in, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, as the heads of the province of Babylon, would have been in charge of that. So Daniel isn't there because I believe that the king trusted Daniel. However, he wanted everyone to show their obedience by worshiping this image that he set up. So you can bet that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego really prayed about this before this happened, right? And they knew what they were going to do. Now, when everybody bows down here, they're kind of in the middle, and who knows where they were standing, but as the heads of the province of Babylon, they may have had front row seats right up at the front if they kind of stacked them in order of importance. So anyway, they stood out, and men who were jealous, they said, look at King, those three men that you put in charge of the province of Babylon, they're not even obeying you. And the king was just awfully mad. It says that his face grew ugly and mean and everything. And he said, you should bow down right now. And if you don't, I'm going to throw you into the fiery furnace. Now, the furnace was probably not exactly on the same plane, but it would have been nearby because that's what they would have used to have forged the metals for the statue. And so he had that here as a great incentive, a motivator, if you will, for people to bow down. But of course they didn't bow down. And he said, what God is there who will save you out of my hand? Now, just as a little aside here, in Jeremiah 29, I think it's 29, Jeremiah mentions two prophets that Nebuchadnezzar did roast. Now, they were false prophets, and Nebuchadnezzar roasted them, and there was no problem from God because God wanted them roasted, obviously, but they were false prophets. So Nebuchadnezzar had probably already done that. So when he says to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and what God is there who will rescue you out of my hand, he thought it was a done deal because God hadn't stopped him when he roasted the other two. And these guys say, well, you know who God is because he knew who God was because of Daniel chapter 2. But be it known unto you, our God can save us, and even if he doesn't, we're not going to do this. And so there are plenty of applications there. When somebody asks you to lie, when somebody asks you to cheat, when somebody wants to look at your paper in class, whatever the case may be, you do the right thing. You honor and obey God. So Nebuchadnezzar threw them in, and you can talk about the story, how he heated up 7 times more than it should be, and the men who threw these guys in got roasted outside the door and everything. So Nebuchadnezzar looks in the hole, and what does he see in there? He doesn't see 3 guys, he sees 4 guys. Now these guys look rather Eastern. The angel looks rather Caucasian and Western. Yeah, I think, whatever. It was definitely an angel, and some people think it may have been Jesus. So Nebuchadnezzar, when they come out, everybody's smelling the guys, they don't smell burned, they don't look burned, anything. Here's the thing, Nebuchadnezzar worships, and he makes an edict, he makes a law at that point with all of the people he's trained from all the nations, all of the leaders, the entire government of the empire is there. And he says, anyone who says anything bad about the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or makes them try to worship another God, will be basically punished. And so at this point, this is such an important chapter because it's at this point that Nebuchadnezzar protects the Jews, and he says they don't have to worship any other God. They could remain a distinct people in their exile in his entire empire. Everybody had to obey. It's an amazing thing that God did. It's a great story. You get to chapter 4, and of course the news went out, right? The news went out about all these things that happened. Now in chapter 4, here's Nebuchadnezzar writing a letter to all the nations, and he's saying, this is what God did to me. And so you know this story, you read the story. Nebuchadnezzar sees a vision, and in the vision there's a mighty tree, and none of the wise men can understand this. The tree gets cut down and the tree is actually preserved, but he doesn't understand what it means. Daniel comes in then, and he tells him that if the king doesn't humble his heart, he will be punished. You can talk about pride, you can talk about the things that we think we do. God gives us everything. He gives us our next breath. It says in the Lord's Prayer, give us this day our daily bread. Most of us don't even think about that, but if it weren't for God, none of us could take a next breath. So we owe God everything. Well, so there's Nebuchadnezzar. He listens to Daniel, but just like all of us, he forgets. About a year later, God was so patient with him. He waited a whole year. And here's Nebuchadnezzar looking over Babylon that I built with my own hands. He doesn't even finish the sentence. And God says, oh yeah? So therefore, I'm going to take you out of the community of mankind. And actually, one of the ways to look at this is like, we are made in God's image. And God puts a sense within us that's just like him. We can think and we can love. It's our spirit that God gives us. We're created in the image of God. Animals are not created in the image of God. So what does God do? You could almost say that God takes the image out of Nebuchadnezzar. Now all that's left, he's just like an animal. And he's eating acorns and grubbing around in the grass, and he's eating grass, and people would come and feed him apples and carrots and nice things. Who held the government together? How did they even know that this was going to happen to Nebuchadnezzar and after 7 years he would recover? Daniel, right? Right? So Daniel may have been in charge of the government for these 7 years, and everybody would have known about this event. They would have known about it in Persia. Cyrus would have known about this. Daniel chapter 6, it says that Darius was a 62-year-old man when he took over the kingdom. How did they... Why tell us that he's 62? He would have known this. Actually, Cyrus may have come here as a young man and fed Nebuchadnezzar a carrot. Who knows, right? But it was world news. And at the end of it, Nebuchadnezzar writes and worships God. And he tells everyone about how great God is. It could be that Nebuchadnezzar died as a believer in Yahweh. And of course, I haven't read the lesson 5, whatever CEF has in here, but this is a good thing to mention about telling other people. That's what Nebuchadnezzar's doing. He's being a witness. He's telling other people in all lands, not just the lands he controls. This letter is international in scope. There were lands outside of Nebuchadnezzar's control with whom the Babylonians had trade, and he's writing it to everybody. Wonderful, amazing testimony of what God is doing with this king. That's Daniel chapter 4.